Fellowship Farm. Book 17. Heartache and Happiness at Fellowship Farm. In Book 17, the Fitzgeralds find out what the flood has left behind at Fellowship Farm. They experience the joys and challenges of living in a haybarn, find some unpleasant surprises in their house, and some pleasant surprises in their hearts. They have a bonfire that brings joy and grief, enjoy some servings of Uncle Jack's health foods, win the Laundromat lotto, and experience a huge surprise when out shopping with their uncle. Chapter 1: Fire at Dawn. Just as the sun appeared faintly above the horizon near Fellowship Farm, the Fitzgerald children started to wake. Lying next to them were their parents, Romy and Flip. Each of them was in a warm sleeping bag, which their Uncle Jack had brought from Hobart after their house was flooded. Sleeping nearby were their dogs Flea, Flex and Fizz, whose doghouse had also been flooded. As the sun shone through the eastern window of the haybarn, its rays highlighted the dust floating in the air. The children lay quietly on their backs, watching the motes of dust slowly dancing on the gentle currents. Sky Marie could see lamplight shining from down below. Still within her sleeping bag, she wiggled and rolled across the hay, until she could hang her head over the side of the bales. Down below she saw her uncle. He was sitting on one of the foldable chairs. Next to him, on the table, was a cup the size of a small bucket. He was having his very large morning coffee and reading a large book. "What are you reading?" Sky Marie whispered loudly. Uncle Jack glanced up at his niece. "God passes by," he loudly whispered back. "Is it good?" asked Sky Marie. "Best in the world," replied Uncle Jack. "Is it funny?" asked Sky Marie. Uncle Jack shook his head. "But I know a book that is very, very funny. It's called God Loves Laughter. I'll send you a copy when I get home." "Thank you," said Sky Marie. Sky Marie slithered out of her sleeping bag and came sliding quietly down the hay. She was soon followed by her younger brother, Alinga, and her older sister, Lisa. The dogs followed quickly behind them. Lisa's long, thick, dark, curly hair was usually plaited before bed, but she had forgotten to ask Romy the night before. Her hair stood on its ends, wild and woolly. It already had bits of hay caught in it. She pulled it back into a ponytail, slipped a hair tie off her wrist, and wrapped it around her hair. Uncle Jack pulled his nieces and nephew close in a giant good morning squeeze. "Shall we go and have our prayers outside this morning so Mum and Dad can have a bit more sleep?" he suggested. The children nodded. As they passed Uncle Jack's truck, parked in front of the hay barn, he reached into the cabin and pulled out a velvet bag. Then he grabbed the tarpaulin that usually covered the back of the truck and dragged it across the grass. When they were a few meters away from the barn, the children helped him smooth out the tarpaulin, and each of them found a place to sit. The dogs also settled nearby, happy on the cool, damp grass. The sun was now rising over the farm, flooding the sodden fields with golden light. With much care and reverence, Uncle Jack unzipped the velvet bag. Inside were several prayer books. He gave one each to Lisa and Sky Marie. Alinga was still learning to read and found the long words in the prayer book difficult. "Have you ever read the fire tablet?" Uncle Jack asked. They shook their heads. "Would you like to try?" he asked. They nodded. "Okay, Turn to page 214 in the prayer books. Uncle Jack did the same thing with the prayer book he was holding. Can you see how the fire tablet is broken into lines? There are 51 of them. What we can do is take it in turns to read one line each. We just keep reading one line each until we finish the prayer. The girls nodded. Uncle Jack allowed some time for all 4 of them to focus their hearts. They each decided to turn to face the rising sun. The children crossed their legs, placed their hands in their laps, held their backs straight, and slightly lowered their heads. Uncle Jack was too big and too stiff to cross his legs, but he also held his body reverently. When everyone was ready, Uncle Jack started to pray. In the name of God, the most ancient, the most great. Lisa read the next line. Indeed, the hearts of the sincere are consumed in the fire of separation. Where is the gleaming of the light of thy countenance, O beloved of the worlds? Sky Marie read the one after. Those who are near unto thee have been abandoned in the darkness of desolation. Where is the shining of the morn of thy reunion, O desire of the worlds? As the dawn light washed over them, so did the words of Baha'u'llah. Partway through the prayer, Sky Marie looked up at her uncle. She realized he wasn't reading the prayer. She could see that he knew the whole prayer by heart. His book was closed and resting on his thigh. His face was turned toward the sun. She noticed that his face was in a peaceful smile, and tears of love were rolling down his cheeks as he prayed. Chapter 2: Pigs in Pens. When they had finished reading the fire tablet, they sat quietly. The sounds of the farm filled the morning air. The cows lowed, kangarooster crowed, and the creek flowed. After some moments of meditation, they all stood up and dragged the tarpaulin back to the truck. Now that our souls are well cared for, how about some health food for breakfast? The children weren't sure whether or not to say yes. Usually Uncle Jack's idea of health food was quite different from their mother's. But the children themselves were very fond of Uncle Jack's health foods. What kind of health food? Asked Alinga. Wholesome, crunchy grains of popped rice coated in crystallized cane juice and the essence of ground cocoa beans, replied Uncle Jack as they entered the barn. A voice came down firmly from above. No Cocoa Pops, Rummy demanded. We have a big day of work ahead of us and the children need nutritious food in their bellies. Like I was saying, said Uncle Jack, scrambled eggs with fried onions, tomato and cheese served with brown bread and a glass of juice. Yum! Yes, please, said Alinga. After breakfast, the work began. The children were very curious about what it would be like inside the house. But before they could start on the house, the animals needed attention. The family walked up the hill paddock to the higher part of the farm. In the top paddocks were all the cows from the river paddock, the horses and the pigs. Working as a team, the family herded the pigs back to the pigsty. They really only had to guide the sows, as the piglets followed their mothers. With patience, they guided the sows down the hill, over the bridge, past the barn, across the grass and into the pigsty. Flip and Jack loaded the ute with bales of straw and drove it to the sty. Everyone helped unload it, and soon the sty was covered in a thick layer of fresh straw. They had a few food scraps for the pigs, but Romy also brought a big load of pellets down from the barn next to the hay barn and filled the trough. The water trough was full of water already. The family left the pigs to settle back into their home and turned to walk up to the top of the hill paddock. There were many cows in a small paddock, and they had turned the grass into mud with their hooves. They were very happy to have the gate opened. They didn't need any urging to walk through the gate to the lush green grass in the hill paddock. The cows had to be encouraged to keep walking, as they wanted to stop to eat the grass. Eventually, they all made it down the hill, across the bridge, past the barn, past the farmhouse, and out the gate onto the dirt road. They were then herded into the dam paddock on the other side of the road. When the last cow had crossed the road and entered the dam paddock, Romy closed the gate. Next were the chickens. They needed fresh, clean straw in their pen and some pellets to eat as well. Sky Marie opened the door of the chicken house and let them out to scratch for worms in the soft, wet soil of the farm. Flip drove a ute load of straw to the hen house, and everyone helped spread the straw throughout. The farm dogs had been let off their chains during the flood. Now the family was back on the property. They were chained at the front of the tractor shed as usual. They were the easiest to care for, as there were always meaty bones in the shed fridge for them. By the time all the farm animals had been checked, fed and attended to, it was lunchtime. After washing their hands with soap, the children helped Uncle Jack bring out more treasures from the esky. There were rolls, tomatoes, lettuce and cheese slices individually wrapped. Romy and Flip always bought fresh, locally made cheese from the Kellyton market. They called the kind of cheese Uncle Jack bought plastic cheese. But the children secretly liked plastic cheese a lot. It was soft and salty. Flea, Flex and Fizz had had an active morning following the Fitzgeralds all over the farm. They were hungry now and sat near the lunch table alert for any crumbs that might fall. Normally the dogs stayed outside the house, so it was a great treat to have them nearby during meals and at night when they were sleeping. Lisa couldn't resist slipping the dogs some of her bread and cheese, and they were very happy to receive it. However, Flip said it was a waste of precious food to give it to the dogs. He left the table and poured some dry dog food that Uncle Jack had brought for them onto the floor of the hay barn. There weren't enough bowls for the dogs to have some. "Sorry for the lack of refinement," Flip said to the dogs. But they didn't seem to mind. They immediately started to gobble the dry dog food from the floor. After lunch, the family prepared to go to the farmhouse. Uncle Jack handed supplies to each member of the family. Rubber gloves, brooms, mops, hoses, buckets, soap, scrubbing brushes, sponges, and a whole range of tools. He also had some trolleys to help move heavy items, like the fridge. The family agreed it would not be safe or helpful for Flea, Flex and Fizz to come with them to the house. They were tied up in the barn with plenty of water. The dogs were not at all pleased about this, and they made sure everyone knew how they felt. "We'll be back soon, you gooses," said Sky Marie, trying to soothe the yelping dogs, who were straining against the ropes which tied them to the barn wall. The family left the barn and started to walk down the hill to the homestead of Fellowship Farm. What would the house be like? They all wondered as they walked. Chapter 3: Stinky Situation. The first thing they noticed as they strode up the path on the side of the farmhouse was the odor. Even from outside the house, there was a strong smell like a swamp, mixed with the smell of an unflushed toilet. They turned the corner into the backyard. The big wooden doghouse had been moved by the floodwaters to the other side of the garden. It lay on its side, pressed against the back fence, draped in wet plants and covered in mud. Also scattered across the back garden were things that had been washed out of the boot room, toilet, and laundry. There were coats and shoes, soggy rolls of toilet paper, buckets and brooms. The back garden was a soggy, muddy, smelly mess. "Pong!" said Alinga, holding his nose. The family climbed the steps of the veranda and went into the kitchen. There was a dirty line on the wall of the kitchen above the kitchen table, showing how deep the water had been at its deepest. The floor still had muddy puddles. There were kitchen items in the most unusual places, and worst of all, a very strong smell of poo. In a puddle of water under the table, Lisa found their virtues chart. It was ripped and soggy. "I guess we don't really need the virtues chart," said Lisa softly, trying to practice detachment. "We just need the virtues." "True," agreed Romy. "What virtues are we going to need today, do you think?" "Detachment," said Lisa, hoping she would have enough. "True," said Romy again. "What else?" "Determination," said Sky Marie, thinking of all the work that lay ahead. "Patience," added Alinga, wondering how long cleaning the house would take. Flip and Romy nodded. "I think we are all going to need all of those, as well as care. We will need to take good care of each other. We also might feel lots of emotions over the next few days. Maybe fear or sadness, frustration or anger. These are all natural, healthy emotions. We just need to be aware of them and express them appropriately." The family walked through the living room and then on through the rest of the house. The whole house was covered in smelly mud. There was even a dead eel in the bathroom. On the children's bedroom floor were clothes and toys that had washed out of cupboards and now lay in soggy heaps on their bedroom rug. Mattresses were also destroyed. "Let's go outside and consult about how we want to start working," suggested Flip, once they had finished looking at all the damage. He unlocked the front door, which was normally not used. The family walked out of the house and out through the little front gate of the farmhouse. It was a relief to get a bit further away from the smell. Through consultation, the family made a plan. It was decided that everything in the house would need to be thrown out, except the furniture made of hard wood and some of the crockery and cutlery. The wooden furniture, plates, glasses, forks and knives would need to be brought outside and hosed down, dried and put back in the house when the empty house had been hosed and dried. It was the job of the children to bring all the smaller things, like clothes, books, cushions, food, dead eels, to the bottom of the hill paddock. That was the place they had had their Nowruz bonfire. The adults would bring out the bigger items, like mattresses, couches, and curtains. When the house was empty, they would have a big bonfire with all the ruined belongings. The children put rubber gloves on their hands. They put determination in their hearts. Then they started the long job of taking load after load after load after load of soggy, muddy, smelly belongings to the paddock. They tried to practice detachment, but it made them feel quite sad to throw out their school uniforms stained by the black mud, their toys, books, and art supplies. They even had to throw away the guitar, which had been at the center of so many happy experiences for Lisa, Sky Marie, and Alinga. Each time they gathered a new load, they discovered more precious belongings destroyed by the water. Chapter 4: Eating Squashed Flies. At But about the time they would normally arrive home from school on the bus, the children ran out of energy. As Flip and Romy carried a heavy, wet, rolled-up rug out of the house, they found the children sitting on the front steps of the house. "Afternoon tea time," puffed Flip. "We'll drop this and then go to the barn for a snack. Okay?" The children nodded. Uncle Jack came out of the front door after Flip and Romy. He was dragging a sodden mattress. "See you at the barn, Uncle Jack," said Alinga. "Rightio," breathed Uncle Jack heavily. The children started walking up to the barn. They took off their gloves, untied the dogs, and washed their hands. The dogs were very excited to be free and rushed out of the barn, chasing each other and biting each other's ears and tails. Sky Marie opened the esky to see what they might have for afternoon tea. She found some oranges and a packet of squashed fly biscuits. "Yum!" said Sky Marie. She wondered if Romy and Flip would let them have the biscuits. Sky Marie started to peel the oranges and make a pile of orange pieces on a plate. When Flip, Romy, and Uncle Jack came into the barn, she said, "Mummy, are we allowed to have squashed fly biscuits for afternoon tea?" Romy looked at Flip. Flip nodded. "Yes," she replied. Sky Marie opened the packet and put the brown rectangles on a plate. Uncle Jack heated some water for tea. "Hot chocolate, anyone?" Everyone nodded enthusiastically. Uncle Jack heated a big pot of milk and scooped in generous spoonfuls of cocoa and honey. He also added a big bunch of bananas to the afternoon tea. As they ate hungrily and gratefully, Alinga asked, "Are there really squashed flies in these biscuits? No wonder frogs like eating flies. They are so sweet." He took a third biscuit. "Could be," acknowledged Flip. "No, there are not flies in the biscuits, Ollie," said Lisa. "They are sultanas, but they look like squashed flies, so that's why they are called squashed fly biscuits." "Oh," said Alinga. He seemed a bit disappointed to hear that. Clearing the house of the wet belongings had made everyone's clothes wet. While they were working and moving, they felt hot and didn't mind being wet. But after sitting for a while, the wet clothes started to feel cool and uncomfortable. So as soon as everyone had enough to eat, they tied the dogs back up and headed back down to the house. "Are we going to have a bonfire tonight?" asked Lisa. "We won't have finished emptying the house by this evening, Possum," replied Flip. "But we could have one tonight and then another one tomorrow," suggested Sky Marie with bright eyes. "And just keep having bonfires every night until we finish emptying the house." "True," acknowledged Flip. Everyone felt more energized with bellies full of hot chocolate, fruit, and biscuits. They were ready to work hard for the afternoon. Lisa, Sky Marie, and Alinga decided to try a new way of working. Instead of just carrying things in their arms, they decided to put a pile of things on a bedsheet. Then they carried it together, a bit like a big stretcher. They found this was a much more efficient way to carry things. They could take twice as much each trip to the paddock. "I honor your creativity," grinned Uncle Jack. He and Flip were carrying a soggy, swollen chest of drawers made of chipboard out of the house. "And unity," puffed Flip. As the afternoon went on, the pile of furniture and other belongings at the bottom of the hill paddock grew very large. There were also some things, like the fridge and the washing machine, that Uncle Jack wheeled out to the front of the house to take to the tip another day. They couldn't be burned or repaired. As the sun dropped lower in the sky, Lisa asked again if they might have a bonfire that night. Romy, Flip, and Jack consulted and decided it would be a good idea. "Yippee!" cried Alinga. Chapter 5: Burning Away All Things. At the end of the day, 6 pairs of gloves were hung up on the line, and 6 tired people gathered around a very big pile of rubbish. Romy poured a little petrol on part of the pile and lit it. A flame quickly appeared, which gradually spread, drying and burning what used to be the belongings of the Fitzgerald family. As the flames grew higher and hotter, it was exciting to watch. And at the same time, there was a feeling of loss and sadness as their clothes, toys, books, and photos fed the fire. As the blaze grew hotter, the family stepped back. The wide red ribbons danced energetically against the darkening sky, throwing up spurts of sparks. Uncle Jack put his arms around his nieces and said, "Should all the servants read and ponder this, there shall be kindled in their veins a fire that shall set aflame the worlds." It was the last line of the fire tablet. "This is what our hearts should be like," he said, over the crackling and roar of the fire, burning with the love of God. The family watched the fire until it started to lessen in intensity. After some time, the flames dropped down, and all that was left was a hot orange glow in a pile of ash, metal, and bits and pieces of furniture that had not fully burned. The family slowly walked up the hill to the barn. The sun had fully set. The stars were starting to light up the night sky. The air was cool on their faces after the heat of the fire. The frogs and crickets started their evening chorus. The smell of the eucalypts, mixed with the smell of smoke, brought back memories of past camping trips. Each adult slipped their arm around one of the children as they ambled thoughtfully towards the barn. When they arrived at the barn, they untied the dogs, who ran in excited circles around them. Once again, everyone was wet and dirty and keen to have a shower. "You don't need to help prepare dinner tonight," said Flip to the children. "Just get out of your wet clothes before you get sick and have a quick shower." Just as Flip finished speaking, Liza sneezed. Romy, Flip, and Jack started preparing dinner. "You can go first, Liza," said Alinga. "Thank you, Ollie," said Liza. Alinga was really practicing his generosity. He felt so tired he could hardly climb up the hay bales to get his clothes and towels. He didn't even feel like eating. He just wanted to go to bed. While Liza showered, Alinga lay down for a minute on the sheets covering the hay. Flea, Flex, and Fizz snuggled in beside him. Alinga gently stroked their soft, warm bodies. Then his hand slid from Flea's back and fell to Alinga's side. When Liza finished her shower and climbed back up to the top of the barn, Ollie was fast asleep. Liza hung her head over the edge of the bales. "Daddy, Ollie's fast asleep." Flip looked up from where he was slowly peeling carrots. He put the peeler and the carrot down and slowly climbed the hay bales to the top. Liza could see her dad was just as tired as she was. Together they changed Alinga's clothes and pulled the sleeping bag over him. "He'll just have to go to bed with an empty tummy, dirty teeth, and a hungry soul," said Liza. "Yes, although Abdu'l-Baha says, 'Work done in the spirit of service is the highest form of worship.' So really, he's been praying all day. So he'll have a holy soul and holy teeth." Sky Marie appeared at the top of the barn, fresh and clean after her shower. Flip and Liza slid down the bales. Liza set the table, while Romy and Flip finished chopping sweet potato, mushrooms, silver beet, carrots and onions for the vegetable stew. Uncle Jack had walked back down to the hen house to lock them in for the night. There were many Tasmanian devils around who liked to eat chickens. Chapter 6: Flood Fatigue. While the stew bubbled away on the portable stovetop, the adults took their showers. Sky Marie and Lisa decided to have a game of Uno with the cards that Uncle Jack had brought. It seemed Uncle Jack had thought of everything. Lisa dealt the cards. The rules of Uno said that the dealer should deal 7 cards to each player. However, the Fitzgerald children had made up a rule that the dealer could choose how many cards to deal. Lisa dealt 15. "Lisa," complained Sky Marie, "that's too many cards. I can't hold 15 cards at the same time." "Dealer chooses," said Lisa, without any consideration for the problem she had created for her sister. "That's not fair," said Sky Marie as the cards tumbled from her hand. Lisa saw that Sky Marie had a lot of yellow cards. "Now you're cheating. Stop looking at my cards." "I'm not." "I too am not." "I too. Not, said Lisa and poked out her tongue. Sky Marie dropped the rest of her cards and stood up. She felt cross and frustrated. "I'm not playing anymore," she said and walked away. "Sky," whined Lisa, "come and help pack up the cards." "No!" "Hey, tired girls," said Romy gently. "Soon we can have a big sleep. Let's do what we can to keep the unity until then, okay?" Neither Sky Marie nor Lisa cared about unity right at that moment, but they stopped bickering and ignored each other. Romy helped Lisa pack up the cards. Sky Marie went to play with the dogs, who, when they smelt dinner cooking, had come back down from the top of the barn. Soon the vegetable stew was ready to eat. 3 adults, 2 children, and 3 dogs gathered at the dinner table, looking forward to something yummy in their tummies. "Nothing for you, hounds," said Flip, giving Flea a gentle nudge with his foot. Romy gave the bag of dog food a shake and encouraged the dogs to leave the dining area by pouring some pellets onto the floor of the barn far away from the table. That kept the dogs busy for about 30 seconds. While the family ate, they talked about the days ahead. They would need to finish emptying the house of damaged belongings. Then they would need to hose the house down and let it dry. They would need to wash the hard wooden furniture as well as the plates, cups, forks and knives. They would need to go to Launceston or Hobart to buy new furniture, clothes, books and all the other things that had been destroyed. They would also need to get someone to fix the electricity. They would soon run out of food in the barn, so they would need to get some groceries. But they would have to travel a long way, as Kellyton shops would not be open for a while. They would soon run out of clean clothes, so they would need to go to the laundromat in Lymedale. There was so much work to be done. Everyone already felt exhausted. Lisa put her head on the table, pretending to fall asleep just from talking about all the work that needed to be done. "Why don't you girls go and brush your teeth and get ready for prayers?" suggested Romy. The girls left the table and went outside the barn to brush their teeth. The adults continued consulting. As Sky Marie lifted her arm to brush her teeth, she could feel all her muscles aching. "I really don't want to do any more cleaning up," said Sky Marie as she put toothpaste on her brush. Said Lisa with a mouthful of toothpaste, meaning me neither. I just want to go back to school, said Sky. Liza nodded enthusiastically. Big blobs of toothpaste dribbled down out of her mouth and onto her chin. I'm sick of mud, said Sky Marie. Uh-huh, agreed her sister. I'm sick of the smell of poo. Uh-huh. I'm sick of being wet. Uh-huh. Flip joined them outside. Sounds like you two are full of flood already. Both girls nodded. That's understandable. Flip put toothpaste on his toothbrush. I'm a bit full of flood, sick of smell, weary of wet, and tired of trash too. As they brushed their teeth together, they looked up at the stars shining in the clear sky above. It was very beautiful, but the air was also cold. They hurried back into the barn where their warm sleeping bags were waiting for them. Chapter 7, Haji, Mirza, Haydar, Ali. Flip, Romy, Uncle Jack, Liza, Sky Marie, Flea, Flex and Fizz gathered at the top of the barn, near where Alinga was already sleeping. As always, he had burrowed into his sleeping bag, leaving just enough of a hole for air to get in so he didn't suffocate. Before we have our prayers, said Uncle Jack, let's think of 19 things for which we are grateful. 19? Said Sky Marie. That seemed like a lot of things to think of, especially when their house, school and town had practically just been washed away. Let's just try, said Uncle Jack. Just then, Flea stretched out and licked Sky Marie's hand. Sky Marie rubbed Flea's head between the ears. Well, I'm grateful our dogs are safe. And we get to sleep with them, added Liza. And we get to sleep in the barn. And eat chocolate, chips and squashed fly biscuits, grinned Liza. And have a visit from Uncle Jack. I'm grateful it stopped raining, said Romy. And all the farm animals are safe, said Flip. And that we got to have a bonfire. And that we have warm sleeping bags. And we have all the delicious food Uncle Jack brought. And we get to have warm showers even though we don't have a house. And we have each other, added Romy. And unity, said Liza. Most of the time, qualified Sky. Except when Liza deals way too many cards, Sky Marie mock-scowled at her sister. The family continued adding to their list of gratitude. Soon they had thought of more than 30 things, and they were still going. Well done, bravo, laughed Uncle Jack. How happy you must have made Abdul-Baha. Now I will tell you a story about someone else who made Abdul-Baha happy too. The children snuggled into their sleeping bags. This was yet another thing to be grateful for. A bedtime story from Uncle Jack. In the time of Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha, there lived a man called Haji Mirza Haydar Ali. He also had a nickname, which was Angel of Carmel. When he became a Baha'i, he travelled all over Persia, telling everyone about the love and wisdom of Baha'u'llah. Unfortunately, there were some people who were unhappy about these ideas of unity and peace. They tried to stop Mirza Haydar Ali from talking about it. They beat him. They put him in prison. One day, they tied up his feet and hands, put him in a bag, and threw him over a donkey. His head dragged in the sand as the donkey walked a long way across a desert. While this happened, Mirza Haydar Ali sang. The guard whipped him to stop him singing, but Mirza Haydar Ali thanked him and sang even more. When he was in Egypt, he was put in a prison for 12 years. That's longer than you've been alive. The prison had a tiny window, so he only had sunshine for 1 hour each day. So what do you think Mirza Haydar Ali did while in prison? He praised God and practiced all the virtues. He became perfectly calm, perfectly patient, perfectly joyful, perfectly detached. Then, eventually, he was let out of prison, and when he was an old man, he came to live with Abdu'l-Baha on Mount Carmel. One day, a woman came to Abdu'l-Baha, and she complained and complained. She said she had a lot of suffering and trouble. She said she was terribly unhappy. Abdu'l-Baha listened to her for a while. Then he said to the woman that she should talk to Mirza Haydar Ali. Abdu'l-Baha told her to ask Mirza Haydar Ali about all the troubles he had in his life. The woman went to talk to him. Mirza Haydar Ali started to talk about the greatness of this time, the wonder of Baha'u'llah. The woman started to get impatient. She said, "I want to hear about your troubles." Abdu'l-Baha said you would tell me about your troubles. Mirza Haydar Ali looked amazed. He said, "I never had any troubles. I don't know what troubles are." Mirza Haydar Ali told the woman that he didn't even notice whether he was healthy or ill, rich or poor, in safety or not. His heart was full of trust in God and love for Baha'u'llah, so he was always happy. Chapter 8: Winning the Laundromat Lottery. When they woke in the morning, the children learned of the plans that their parents and uncle had made the night before. They were very pleased about the plans, though they didn't even know about some of the happy surprises that lay ahead. After breakfast, Flip and Romy went down to the house to continue cleaning it out. Uncle Jack, Lisa, Sky Marie and Alinga put the esky on the back of the truck. They pushed all the wet and dirty clothes into bags. They put the bags on the back of the ute as well. They attached the tarpaulin to the tray of the truck and disconnected the boat trailer. Then they climbed in. Uncle Jack drove slowly along the potholed dirt road. When they reached the town, they saw that work was already being done to repair the road. Shops and the school had big piles of rubbish out the front. Big trucks were driving around, collecting the rubbish and taking it to the tip. Along the streets were people with hoses and brooms. Some of them had bright green vests on. Some had bright orange vests. The whole town was working together to get back on its feet. The children waved and smiled as they drove through Kellyton. Their friends waved back. As they drove toward Limedale, the sun shone brightly. It made steam rise from the road. Over the soggy paddocks was a layer of mist. A rainbow appeared where the sun shone on the mist. When they arrived at the laundromat, Uncle Jack parked the truck out the front. Everyone climbed out. Uncle Jack stretched the elastic straps holding the tarpaulin to the tray of the ute to release the corner of the tarp. He reached in and passed the bags of clothes to the children, and they carried them inside. The bag Alinga carried was almost the same size as Alinga. It was difficult for him to see where he was going, but he persevered. Inside, the laundromat was brightly lit and very warm. There was a strong smell of laundry powder and a constant swish of washing machines. From the row of dryers, there was a hum of machines and clunking sounds as buckles and zippers hit the metal of the inside of the dryer. There was a small machine in one corner with pictures of money on the front. Uncle Jack handed Sky Marie a $20 note. "Go and see what happens if you put this note in that machine," he suggested to his niece. Sky Marie, followed by Alinga and Lisa, went over to the machine. There was a slot in the front. Lisa smoothed the note and put it into the slot. The machine sucked it inside. A few seconds later, 20 coins came tumbling out of the machine into a metal tray. When Uncle Jack heard the clinking and rattling of the coins falling into the tray, he hurried over. "You won! You won! Well done! Bravo! We're rich!" He encouraged the children to scoop the coins out of the tray and led them back to the washing machines. 4 machines were filled with the clothes of the Fitzgerald family and Uncle Jack. Uncle Jack showed Lisa how to pull the little tray out and fill it with soap powder. Then Sky Marie and Alinga took it in turns to put coins in the slots and press the green buttons. There was a hissing sound as the machines filled up with water. "How long will they take?" asked Alinga. "About an hour," replied Uncle Jack. "Just the right amount of time for us to fill up Esther," he added. "Fill up Esther?" asked Alinga. "Esther the Esky," replied Uncle Jack. "Let's take Esther to the supermarket and fill her up," he suggested, leading the way to the truck. "Does Esther like health foods?" asked Alinga, hopefully. "She certainly does," replied Uncle Jack. "Yippee!" Chapter 9, Claudia Fraikin's Used Cars and Caravans. At the supermarket, the children rushed from the truck to the trolleys. Each one of them wanted to be the one to push the trolley. Uncle Jack locked the truck and strolled from the car park to the front of the supermarket. Each one of the children was waiting behind a trolley, and each one hoped Uncle Jack would choose his or her trolley. "Perfect," he said. "We need 3 trolleys. Rock and roll on. We shall fill one trolley with things that need to go in Esther the Esky to stay cold. We shall fill the other 2 with—" Uncle Jack didn't finish his sentence as he became occupied with looking at apples. "With what, Uncle Jack?" asked Lisa. Uncle Jack started filling a string bag he had brought with shiny red apples. "With what? With chocolate, chips, and biscuits, of course," replied Uncle Jack, moving toward the bananas. The family moved slowly through the shop, filling the trolleys with oranges, apples, bananas, lettuce, tomato, cucumber, broccoli, carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, mushrooms, beans, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, bread, rolls, rice, pasta, pasta sauce, tofu, vegetable burgers, cereal, peanut butter, Vegemite, honey, juice, muesli bars, and a few packets of chocolate, chips, and biscuits. Uncle Jack led them to the checkout, and the children lined up the trolleys one after the other. As they started to take the groceries out of the trolleys and put them on the sliding bench, they noticed a man standing behind them, holding a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk. "Would you like to go ahead of us?" Sky Marie asked. The man smiled, as if to say he would very much like to go ahead of the Fitzgerald family with their 3 trolleys of food. Uncle Jack stepped out of the way. "Thank you very much," said the man to Sky Marie. "For practicing your consideration," whispered Uncle Jack, finishing the man's sentence. "You're welcome," replied Sky Marie to the man. After the groceries were all paid for and packed in the truck, Uncle Jack declared it was morning tea time and handed everyone an apple. "No health foods for morning tea?" asked Alinga. Uncle Jack pulled out a big packet of crisps and opened it. They returned to the laundromat and lugged all the damp washing across to the dryers. The children took it in turns to place the coins in the slot. They watched as the dryers started to turn the clothes around and around. The most surprising thing happened next. The family climbed back into the ute and drove for about 5 minutes. When they stopped, they were out the front of a big yard, like a car park. It was full of cars and caravans for sale. Lisa read a big sign at the front. Claudia Fraikin's Used Cars and Caravans. "Are we buying a car, Uncle Jack?" asked Lisa, feeling very surprised. "Nope," replied Uncle Jack and led the way into the office. "How may I help you?" asked the sales assistant. He was wearing a name tag. Uncle Jack read the name tag. "Top of the morning to you, Mr. Hugo," he boomed. "We'd like to buy the biggest, cheapest caravan you have, please." The children looked at each other with open mouths and raised eyebrows. "Certainly," smiled Hugo. "To sleep how many?" "5, please," replied Uncle Jack. Hugo directed the family to another assistant, Eveline, who led the family out into the car yard and over to the caravan section. She opened the door of a white caravan with a red roof. Eveline led the way inside. It was just like a miniature house. There were bunk beds as well as a little kitchen area with a sink, a fridge and a stove. There was even a toilet and a shower. There were windows with little red curtains on them and a table with benches on each side. There were lots of little cupboards. As the children opened the cupboards and looked into the tiny toilet and tiny shower cubicle, Uncle Jack asked lots of questions of Eveline. When Uncle Jack had finished asking questions and the children had explored every corner, they walked down the steps of the caravan, across the car yard, back to the office. "When can you deliver it?" Uncle Jack asked. The children looked at each other with wide eyes. "This afternoon," replied Hugo, passing Uncle Jack some papers and a pen. Chapter 10. Happy Surprises. When they arrived back at the farm, the children scrambled to get out of the truck. They were bursting to tell their parents about what Uncle Jack had bought in Limedale. As Alinga rushed off down the hill from the barn to the farmhouse, Lisa made sure to let him go first. She didn't grab him and she didn't try to run faster than him. She had learnt that kindness and gentleness are more important than getting there first. But she did run down the hill after him. As they arrived at the farmhouse, Romy and Flip were carrying some brown, soggy curtains to the pile of rubbish at the bottom of the hill paddock. "Guess what?" yelled Alinga, arriving breathless at the gate of the farmhouse. "What?" shouted Flip. "Uncle Jack bought us a caravan!" "No way!" shouted Flip with a wink. "Yes way, and it's being delivered this afternoon!" The children followed their parents to the rubbish pile so they could continue the conversation. Romy and Flip dumped the curtains on the pile. "We can talk all about it while we have lunch," said Romy. Romy and Flip were dirty and wet again, but the curtains had been the last item to be removed from the house. It was now empty and ready to be hosed down. When they reached the barn, Lisa said, "You two have a rest. We will make lunch." Romy and Flip both stretched out on some bales of hay. Uncle Jack brought Esther the esky in from the truck, and the children started making sandwiches. When lunch was ready, Romy and Flip pushed themselves up and took their seats at the table. As soon as they had said their prayer of thanks, Alinga asked, "Now can we talk about the caravan?" Romy nodded, chewed and swallowed. Then she explained that it was going to take some time to fix the electricity in the house, to hose the house, let it dry, paint it, and replace the furniture. In the meantime, the family was going to live in the caravan. "How long will we live in the caravan?" asked Alinga, with shining eyes, squirming with excitement in his seat. "Maybe a few weeks, maybe a month," answered Flip. "Yippee!" cried Sky Marie. It seemed like a great adventure to live in the tiny little house with its clever cupboards and drawers and tiny little shower. "Will we go to school?" "The school might be shut for several weeks," replied Romy. "What will we do while it's shut?" asked Lisa. "We might have to do some study at home, and you can help paint the house when it's time to do that," replied Flip. "But for the next couple of days, your job will be to catch us some fish." This was yet another surprise. Uncle Jack told them he was going to take them out on his boat for a few days before he returned to Hobart. Sky Marie excitedly raised her arm to high-five Lisa. Unfortunately, as she raised her arm, it collided with the foldable table. The table tipped, its legs wobbled and collapsed. The plastic plate of cheese and tomato sandwiches slid on the floor. As quick as a flash, Flea, Flex, and Fizz leaped on the sandwiches and gobbled them up. Sky Marie covered her mouth with her hands as the lunch disappeared into the bellies of the dogs. "Now we've all had a happy surprise today," said Flip, picking up the table and looking at the dogs. "I think it might be God's way of saying we should have chocolate for lunch," suggested Uncle Jack. "I don't think God is saying anything of the sort, Jack," replied Romy, heading for the esky to get some more bread, cheese and tomato. "I am very sure God wants us to have cheese and tomato sandwiches for lunch." "My sister the prophet," smiled Uncle Jack. Romy made some more sandwiches, but these also ended up in the tummies of the dogs. Just as she finished making the sandwiches, there was a sound of squeaking brakes and a honk of a truck's horn. The children rushed out the barn. A big truck pulling a large caravan was pulling into Fellowship Farm. As soon as Romy, Flip, and Jack followed the children out of the barn, the dogs climbed up on the chairs and grabbed the sandwiches from the plate on the table, wolfing them down. Flea, Flex, and Fizz felt very happy. And so did the Fitzgeralds of Fellowship Farm. When the family went to sleep that night, it was not in a cold and drafty hay barn. It was in a cozy caravan. And as the Fitzgeralds drifted off to sleep in their new little house, the children dreamt of the fish they planned to catch from Uncle Jack's boat. But that is another story.